Loose around to the far corner. 2 seconds. The Penguins are going to win the Stanley Cup, I believe. Stelio shoots it blocked. The Penguins have won the Stanley Cup. Oh, Lord Stanley, get me the brandy.
Hello out there, we're on the air. It's hockey night tonight. Tension grows, the whistle blows, and the puck goes down the ice. The goalie jumps and the players bump and the fans all go insane. Someone roars, Bobby scores at the good old hockey game. Oh, the good old hockey game is the best game you can name. And the best game you can name is the good old hockey game. Second period, where players dash with skates aflash. The home team trails behind, but they grab the puck and go bursting up, and they're down across the line. They storm the crease like bumblebees. They travel like a burning flame. We see them slide the puck inside. It's a 1-1 hockey game. Oh, the good old hockey game is the best game you can name. And the best game you can name is the good old hockey game. Third period, last game in the playoffs, too.
And welcome to another episode of The Sin Bin, a Pittsburgh Penguins hockey podcast. I am your host, Jeff Canarsie. And here's the deal. I don't know what to say about this team anymore. I really don't. And it's been a tough season. Obviously been marred by a lot of offseason moves that weren't made. There's the glowing issue in net, as we've obviously been seeing all year. And so before I did this show, I said to myself, I want to do this a little differently. Let's just let analytics speak a little bit for themselves. Well, more or less, I'm as lost as many of you are. I'm as lost as Ron Converse. I'm as lost as Ron Korber, Rick Porter. I'm as lost as Patrick, Robert Mason. I'm as lost as the rest of you. Over the years, we've been on our Facebook page, the Penswog Post Kennedy Club. For years, we've seen some Stanley Cups, but we've seen a lot of hardship too. And so one of the things that I wanted to do today was just get right to the point. And the only way to really begin this show to sort of emphasize where we're going to go with it is this.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
And that's about as basic as it gets. I do follow Dan Kingerski. I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. And I follow a lot of other Pens beat reporters. And I think Dan is covered the Penguins quite well. I think he's been fair. He's called a spade a spade. Mark Madden, I could give a fuck less. He'd go fuck himself. That's how I feel about that guy. If Jim Cornette doesn't like him, I don't like him. But here we are, coming off another loss. The Penguins lost, obviously, last night 6-4 against the cellar-dwelling Montreal Canadiens. Tristan Jarry, who has been back and forth yet again, like he was last season. And it really, this team, we can argue that the third and fourth line aren't doing their job. We can talk about Jeff Carter all day long. But the reality is goaltending is going to be, honest to God, what kills this team going forward if they make the playoffs. I do believe, sitting here right now currently at 1 o'clock in the morning, that they will make the playoffs. But it's going to be a very similar type of exit because of goaltending. That's not really the only issue. There's several issues on this team. But Tristan Jarry lets in 4 goals on 12 shots in 22 minutes. Jeff Carter gets benched and only plays north of 8 minutes and was a putrid -4. The Penguins outshot the visiting Montreal Canadiens 43-22. Jan Rutta leaves the game hurt, as does Jeff Petrie. Brian Dumoulin, Petrie, Jan Rutta, POJ, and Carter combined for a -14. Let me say that again. Jan Rutta, who left the game hurt, so did Jeff Petrie, but combined, Brian Dumoulin, Jeff Petrie, Jan Rutta, and POJ and Jeff Carter were a -14. That is unacceptable. Since the All-Star break, The Penguins are being outscored 4-13 when Jeff Carter's line is on the ice. They're outscoring teams 38-28 during that same stretch without Carter's line on the ice. Do you need more? There have been 59 games in the NHL this season where a team has had at least 69% share of the expected goals and actually scored 4 goals. The teams that have done that are 56-2-1 this season in those games. So 69% of teams that score over 4 goals win. They go 56-2-1. The Penguins don't. As of today, earlier this afternoon, the Penguins are 4th in the Metro Division with 78 points. They have 2 games in hand on the Islanders, which makes the next 2 games against the Rangers a huge, huge deal. And looking at the wild card race, the Penguins and the Islanders are situated to make the playoffs if it started today. However, the Florida Panthers are 3 points behind the Islanders and 5 points behind our beloved Penguins. So it's too early to call. You go on a bad tailspin. Florida starts to win some games. If Ottawa starts to win some games, we're in trouble. The Penguins in their last 10 are 7-2-1. And with 20 points on the line in those games, they acquired 15 points. Now, if this is in October, November, good. They're on the right path. Acquiring 15 points when 20 are on the line isn't the worst thing in the world. 7-2-1 in the last 10 is not bad. But the Penguins have 15 games remaining on the schedule, and there's 30 points on the line, which would put the Penguins right around 100 points even for the season, which is right around where they were last year. The remaining schedule could be a fucking nightmare for this team because they have not played against bottom-dwelling teams very well all year. We have 2 against the New York Rangers. We have 1 against Ottawa, 1 against Colorado, 1 against Dallas, 1 against Washington, 1 against Detroit, who we can't seem to beat. We have 1 against Nashville, 1 against Boston, which we will not win, 1 against Philadelphia, 1 against New Jersey, 1 against Minnesota, another 1 against Detroit, Chicago, and Columbus. In those 15 games, in reality, for this team to make it into the playoffs without a problem, they're going to have to get 7 wins of the final 15. 7-8 is the golden number. That's what they're going to need to stay in the playoffs. 14-16 points will get this team into the playoffs. So they can go. So if they can at least go 7-6-5, they should just sneak in. They're not going to catch the Rangers. Now, we play the Rangers tomorrow, which would be Thursday, and then I believe Saturday or Thursday, Friday, one of the two. I can't remember. I think it's Thursday, Saturday. In either case, if they win both of those games, that's huge because the Penguins will be put into a position where they can overtake the Rangers, which is kind of what we want to do at this point. We do not want to be hovering in the bottom 2 wild cards because we do not want to play Boston in the first round. That's a definite no. Can the Penguins do it? Sure. I think they could beat the Rangers twice. I don't have a problem believing that. But it's the Detroit teams I worry about. It's the Ottawa teams. It's Philadelphia. It's teams that they should regularly beat that they don't. So like I said, in all reality, 7-8 wins is what I think they're going to need to stay in the playoff race or to get in. 14-16 points are going to get that done. So like I said, they could go 7-6-5 and they should just barely, sort of sneak in. I personally don't think they're going to pass the Rangers. It's possible, but I just don't think it's realistic. Like I said, if they win both games against the Rangers, they could very well overtake them. But come on, let's be realistic here. They play down to teams that are cellar dwellers. And let's be honest about where this team is. They're not a good hockey team. And so that's where the Penguins stand today. We haven't totally discussed the moves that were made and how those results have been. So we did acquire Dmitry Kulikov, Mikhail Granlund, and Nick Bonino. The problem is Kulikov wasn't a needed asset. Was it a good decision? I mean, I'm sure in Hextall's mind it was. Was that the first decision? No. There were other guys they wanted before that. But it doesn't matter now because he's on LTIR. He's going to be out week to week. He's going to miss the minimum of 10 games, which means he'll be back right before the playoffs. Nick Bonino, in his 3 games back in a Pens jersey, was solid on special teams. But he's out with a lacerated kidney, and he's out week to week. Mikael Granlund is the one decision that I often think about, especially when you consider that we're paying him $5 million per. And what you thought, or what you essentially bought here, was a second-line winger fee for the output, which is just barely a minimum shade above Kasperi Kapanen. In the 6 games that he's played with the Penguins, he has 2 points and is +2. His shooting percentage is over 16%. And I hate to get, too over analytical about that, but that's one of the highest shooting percentages on this fucking team, and that's a sad fact. His face-off percentage is over 57%. That's why you went out and you acquired him. Let's take the price off the table. You went out and acquired him because he's speedy, he can finish, he can definitely finish, he's got a shot. But his face-off percentage was 57%. That's fantastic. And it is the highest on the team now. Carter was the higher of the two with 58% face-off winning percentage, but that's just absolutely gone out the fucking window the last 5 games. So you bring in a guy like Granlund to win face-offs. So in that category alone, he is in fact doing what he's fucking paid to do. He's earning his paycheck. Is it too high of a cost? I think so. But the offensive abilities that he does have, we haven't truly seen yet. His goal the other night was a beauty. But is this guy worth $5 million? No, I don't think so. However, the intangibles that he does provide are actually helping. And in comparison to the other options that we had. And I think the problem here is output versus expectations versus reality. Reality is a hard thing with this franchise. Reality is Granlund has a great shot. He wins faceoff. He's a quick guy. But the negative traits come down to his positional play. He's having a problem playing his position in the scheme, which goes more towards Sullivan. It's something we've seen for years. Being put on a line with stiffs doesn't help him either. Putting him next to Carter kills him. And my point being, based on his output in 6 games, you can probably expect a total of 8 points in all reality. Is that a lot to cheer about? Well, maybe it is, maybe it's not. At least he's given us more output than Kapanen did. So he'll end up with something around 8 points in 21 games. Sort of Teddy Bluger type of numbers, to be honest with you. And that's not exactly something to cheer about. So the question becomes, was this a move to shore up the bottom 6? Because a valid argument can be made that all Hextall really truly did here was he supplanted one stiff for another, and he's handing out more cash to do it. Probably a move that isn't going to pan out. I just got to be honest with you, because I get the feeling that Granlund, if slated on the second line or paired with somebody like Brian Rust, he's going to pay more dividends down the line. But you put him with stiffs, he's not going to do anything. So the Montreal game and Tristan Jarry. And the reason why this podcast is entitled The Loss That Should Get Hextall Fired is because when you take in the totality of moves that he made at the deadline, the offseason moves, the facilitated trades last offseason, the lack of moves made both during the offseason and at this deadline in particular, 2 things become very clear. Number one, Ron Hextall's ability to analyze players is completely skewed. It's not very good. One of the knocks on Ron Hextall has been that he's too patient. He waits until the entire house is on fire before calling the fire department. The other knock on Hextall is that he does very little to address the stock in the farm system, and that he holds on to picks like he has cancer, and that first-round the first-round pick is the cure for it. And we can argue the X's and O's till we're blue in the face. But the reality is we are post Jim Rutherford for 2 years now. We can point at Rutherford's inability for patience. We can argue his penchant for rewarding ill-equipped players and shitting on those players who actually did earn their paychecks. But we're 2 years removed. That cannot be the excuse anymore. Hextall has had 2.5 years to take a look at the long-term prognosis of this team. And he's not addressed one of the more glaring issues that nobody seems to be mentioning. What about Wilkes-Barre Scranton? What about the baby Pens? Why have we not drafted, traded, or stockpiled our farm system? Are we all in on the AHL, ECHL, and NHL at this point? And some of that is because it's the reality of the system that's employed by the NHL club. How you draft, how you sign free agents determines what your minor league players like Nylander, Puustinen, and Hollander, who are are reputable AHL players who have the capability to play in the NHL, maybe not on a full-time basis, but a part-time. How you treat that situation says a lot about your NHL parent club. And the problem is these are players who are really not given a chance. John Gruden, he's another guy. He can come up and play a game or two. The differences, however, between the NHL regular gig and an AHL gig are night and day difference. There's a big difference in the quality of players, the speed at which they play, and et cetera. And the Penguins don't really have anybody other than Nylander, who's had a great season, who can come up and help sustain this team. Like I said, Nylander can be a third liner in the NHL tomorrow. We could put him on the third line. He's not going to hurt this team. But once again, it goes back to yet a different issue. And that issue is Mike Sullivan does not like young players. It took how long for POJ to get a regular shift, right? Then the second they trade for Kulikov, what do they do with POJ? They sit him they sit him out. You're the seventh guy in the rotation, only to be put back into the game or onto the bench when Kulikov gets hurt. And so when a team suffers a rash of injuries, the ideal situation is that you call up a player or two, and it doesn't totally put your team into its tailspin unless it's somebody like Crosby or Malkin or Gensel. And I think we can all understand that. So the Penguins don't have the ability to call somebody up as a valued replacement, but we're about to find out, how much stock we have down there, especially when we hear that Kulikov and Petrie are likely to be out. That means Ruhwedel and Friedman are going to come up, or Ruhwedel will play, Friedman will be the seventh, or they're going to bring Ruhwedel, Friedman, and then they're going to call up Smith as well, which Smith should have been on this team all year. I've been saying it all year. But Hextall didn't address a multitude of issues on this team. Instead of youth, we've just gotten older. And I don't want to go step by step about how Hextall has hurt this team because I think it's obvious. But because it's something that we are going to be talking about until he's gone, which I firmly believe is going to be June, I believe he's going to be fired, and rightfully so. And I'll explain that towards the end. But Sullivan has made his point repeatedly. We go with whatever we have, and I totally get that to some extent. However, he does make decisions that just completely fucking confuse me. He continues to put Brian Dumoulin on the ice when in reality, and let's be fair about it, he hasn't been good on most nights. And it's true, Dumoulin has been better since November after a miserable fucking October and November. But his key mistakes the other night has to make you wonder why Sullivan refuses to sit him out of a game and go with somebody else just to see what options he actually does have. And granted, the argument you're going to get pushed back from other people is, and it's a valuable one, and I get it, is that you can't do it now when every point counts. And I totally agree with that. You can't do it now. But where was that the past 3.5 months? Why does he continue to be loyal and reward somebody who's hurting the team? That's just facts. And in hockey, especially when it comes to defensemen, you're going to pair guys together, knowing each guy's strength and weakness. And you are going to hope that one guy's skills offsets the other guy's weakness. So like with Letang, we know that Christopher Letang likes to play a more offensive role at times. So you slot him with a guy who's more stay at home. But time in and time out, Sullivan mismatches the defensive pairings. And it was just recently he started switching up defensive pairings. And for some godforsaken reason, he put Petrie with Dumoulin. It just makes no sense. And there's a host of problems with this team. And rather than, sit back and waste an hour and a half going through every single fucking one of those, consistency is a major problem. Lack of drive, lack of emotion is another glaring issue. We consistently see that there is effort but there's no sustainability in that effort, and that's the problem. Hockey is a 60-minute game from end to end, not 20 minutes here, 5 minutes here, and then the last 9 minutes. That's just, and this has been a problem since Dan Blylsma. And then Johnston, Linus. This is nothing new. This has been over Sullivan's tenure. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. Remember when this team had to fucking outscore everybody just to win a game? They can't even do that anymore. Consistency is everything in the NHL. And I get tired of the whole, hockey is a tough sport to win, and any night somebody can win. Yeah, but when you're a good team, you don't lose to cellar dwellers non-fucking stop. And the excuses coming out of that locker room are getting repetitive. Finally, Jason Zucker just says, you know what? There's no excuse. We played like shit. I'm paraphrasing. He didn't say that. He literally just said, there's no excuses. We've got to be better than this, or that's it. Or we're in a lot of trouble. That's the most honest you could ever hope a hockey player to be. Meanwhile, Sid's nowhere to be heard. And I'm not knocking him for that because I know he's fed up. We can say it's an issue because of the coach. We can say it's because of the injuries. We can throw in all the bullshit that Ron Hextall has done. But all things considered, you're hockey players at the end of the day. The simple things are the things that matter most. What is true is this. While the coach can only do with what he has, he also has to have the ability to make changes on the fly, make roster changes that help and do not hinder your team. The system's depleted. The system is stale. This team is old. And at this point, the effort level at times, I got to be honest with you, is great. But sometimes they're asleep at the wheel. And you can't win hockey games playing that way. And perhaps the biggest point of contention is that the goaltending is just horrible. Jerry may be an all-star twice in name, but he's not an all-star. That's just my opinion. He has the quality of a goalie who sometimes makes incredible saves that blow your mind, but then at other times lets in goals that are completely confusing. Last night, of the 4 goals scored in 12 goddamn minutes, the reality is 2 of them he really had no choice on. Deflections and screens, you can really not put on his feet. That shit kind of happens. But at some point as a defenseman, to get the hell out of the way. So you can't totally put all of that on him. However, shots above the circle and glove side, you can blame him for. And we had this issue with Marc-Andre Fleury. He stood on his head how many times? But every game you could always count at least on 2 goals going in, which would be like, what the fuck? And that's just the way Marc-Andre was. And one of the problems that Tristan Jarry has, and it's a glaring one, is his positioning is horrible. It seems like he's always out of position, forcing himself to go to the opposite direction immediately too many times. He can't handle the puck behind the net. Sometimes he makes it. Most of the time he doesn't. Despite some incredible saves he's made, he's just not consistent. He's not steady. Matt Murray, for example, had a streak where his defenseman helped him out a great deal, and he made terrific saves. He could make the first stop, but then he becomes a fucking head case, and he never rebounded from it and has never been the same. So the loss that we suffered last night, and there's a lot of blame to go around. It's not just on Jarry. But my question of Hextall in this is, why didn't you at least in some part go out and find someone, even if they were older, to back Jerry up in case the situation took a bad turn? The statement that we got this offseason, and even during the deadline, was, well, we like Jerry and Casey and we're fine with that. Really? What fucking team are you watching? And the old saying goes, you need a goalie who can steal games for your team. Remember Jeff Zatkoff? He could steal games. Thomas Greiss? He could steal games. Patrick Olim? He could steal games. The Penguins haven't had that type of goalie since Greiss left. Seriously. Sullivan continues to lob excuses that Jerry isn't playing enough or he's trying to catch up, but let's not give any more excuses. You fucking sucked. And I get it. A coach is going to try to pad it so that people aren't jumping on his goalie. I get it. But at some point, you need to just be vulgar about it. Jerry has not earned the right to a new contract. Rather, if anything, he's earned his way to free agency as far as I'm concerned this offseason. In fact, during this season, and not a lot of beat reporters are covering this, but during this season, Hextall had talks between Jerry's camp and himself, and he offered $7.5 million for a long-term deal north of 4 years. And they couldn't agree on a number. Has Jerry earned $7.5 million? Fuck 7.5. Has he even earned $7 million? Does he deserve $7 million? In my opinion, no. Absolutely not. Tristan Jerry in 2 games, the first against Columbus and then Montreal, he allowed 8 goals on 19 shots. Now, granted, the Pens came back on Columbus, but that goal total is absurd. And while you cannot single-handedly blame Jerry for every miserable thing that happens, he has to own some of this. This season, his goals against average is 2.95, almost 3 goals a game. He's 39th in the league. That's not all-star quality. His save percentage is .910, which is 29th in the league. That is not all-star quality. Those are not stats that your goalie should, those aren't stats that prove that your goalie's exceeding expectations and we like what we got. That's a pitiful goalie. And then Jerry does have a rebound game against the New York Rangers, stopping 27-29, and he shows us in quick little spurts that he can actually play the goddamn game. And then last night happens. And there's just no consistency in his game whatsoever. And then that filters down to defensemen not being confident in his ability to stop the fucking puck, so they overplay to offset Jerry's problems. You've seen it night. Letang is the worst of them. He tries to overplay. So last night, the Penguins were outpaced the majority of the game. And granted, they took a 2-0 lead. And Montreal, pretty much looked asleep at the wheel. But it didn't take long for them to wake up. The Penguins' last 9.5 minutes in the third period, when they finally woke up for the second time after the first 4 minutes. The problem is, hockey's a full 60-minute game. And that's what's needed from this team. But I don't know if they just get settled on being ahead by 2 goals and try to clamp down defensively, but they just stop pressing. They go passive. And I just don't understand that. And that lays at the feet of Sullivan. That lays at the feet of the coach. Because if you're not going to hustle, you're not going to play, and that's the way it should be. John Cooper, Tampa Bay, sat his number 1 line to prove a point. And the next night they came out and fucking played their asses off. And there's a lot of blame to go around in the locker room from Sullivan on down. But you cannot wake up with 9 minutes left and hope to win a goddamn game. Especially against a team who has nothing to really win for other than their pride. And I question where this team's pride is. And so here's an interesting fact. Granlund, right? He was brought in to be your face-off guy. But Sullivan, for some stupid fucking reason I don't even understand, pushed him to be a winger because he wanted to go with Jeff Carter, who's his hero. You trade for a guy, you're paying him $5 million a year, and you stick him on a wing. He's a center, you dipshit. What he does is he wins face-offs. Okay? But yet, Sullivan puts him on the wing. Carter has been atrocious. In 8 minutes that he played, he was -4 last night. And that should tell you everything about Carter's regression. As a result, Sullivan benches him. And what does he do? He puts Granlund in the center position. You guys ready for this? Granlund won every face-off, 12-0. 12, he didn't lose a single fucking face-off. 12-0. So why are you continuing to put Granlund on the wing when he's a natural center and he's going 12-0 on face-offs? 6 of those being in the offensive zone. These are the mistakes that Sullivan, for whatever reason, makes. These are the mistakes he makes. If Carter's face-off abilities are the only goddamn reason why you're playing him, then you should be fired. Because every other stat shows you he has regressed to the point where he's a liability. -4 in 8 fucking minutes should tell you everything. And the reality is, like I said, all the stats in the world could be tossed against the wall, proving that Carter has regressed and should not be on the ice for high-valued situations. But Sullivan keeps putting them the fuck out there. And I don't get it. At some point, you just have to fucking stop. So the problems are big. Age, coaching, GM decisions. And this is where we're at. Sometimes getting the band back together is great in word form, but not in the physical form. This team is a first-round exit. I don't care what anybody says, and I hate saying that. All the willing to win, all the wishing and hoping they'll win is not going to enable them to win. And there is some truth to this. There is some truth in when Sullivan says, look, this is what we have. But I get the feeling that no matter what Sullivan does, inept decisions or not, this team is just not very good. They haven't been. Last year, they gave up a 3-0 series lead on New York. That should have told management that they were not equipped to handle the next season, that they were not coached correctly. Yet here we are with the same two goddamn goalies from last year. Listen, am I the only one that sees it? And the sad reality, my Pens faithful, is that this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. We have got some very, very lonely, cold years ahead of us. It's unfair to Crosby. And listen to me, whether or not you like Crosby, what he's given to this franchise, the pay cuts he took, the years of not going far in the playoffs, he was never a holdout. He took less money so they could sign other people. He deserves better. I don't care if you like him or not. He deserves better. Letang deserves better. The core is the heart of your team, and everybody else is the skeleton or the support beams. And when your beams bend, they start to wither, and they start bowing outward. You cannot expect the heart to function at full capacity. It's like expecting the heart to function 100% when the lungs are filled with fucking water. Any doctor, any building inspector would tell you, it's not how you do things. Yet Hextall and his decisions have crippled this team. And that loss to Montreal is the game that should get Hextall fired for his inept decisions, his inaction, and the undeserved contracts that he signed players to. Listen, Hextall had the ability this offseason, like it or not, to allow Evgeny Malkin to walk, and he should have. Losing Malkin would have upset the apple cart, would have upset the hockey fan base. I get it, but hockey is a business. And the franchise is what matters most. And when you bow to the pressure of the fan base and the other players, you might as well phone it in. Remember, folks, Rutherford wanted to trade Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang. He specifically wanted to trade Evgeny Malkin. And Lemieux absolutely went crazy and said, there's no way you're fucking doing that. And he basically told Rutherford, that's not happening. And so Rutherford, who I don't like at all, responded by quitting because he felt like he couldn't make decisions that would benefit the team in the short term and long term. And while we like Malkin, even his biggest supporters have to admit, had he been moved, you're going to get two new young players to replace him who have youth and more. And maybe Rutherford trades and gets shit in return. Who knows with that guy? We're never going to know. But there were options. But what we do know is that Hextall during this trade deadline wanted to trade for Radko Gudas. Radko Gudas at the deadline. He tried to trade for him. And he also tried to trade for JT Miller, even though they all denied it. Those reports have been coming out the last week. So what does he do? He offers 2 first-round picks for JT Miller, who was hurt at the time. But what Vancouver said was, well, we want a center to come back with the first-round picks. So don't give us 2 first rounds. Give us a first round and send a center back. So why didn't that trade happen? Well, what center could we have fucking sent them back that would have been fair? Teddy Bluger? No. Oh, you think they're going to take Brock McGinn, who's a left winger anyway? Who are they going to take? We didn't have anybody other than Sid and Gino. And trading Gino would have facilitated Miller, who's younger, who's going to score points for the next 6 to 8 years. Well, probably more like 5. But they're not going to take Teddy Bluger and a first-round pick. Remember Hextall saying, I'm not going to trade a first-round pick to relieve cap. And that makes sense. I understand that. But he was willing to move 2 first-round picks for a guy who makes a lot of money without reducing our own cap problems at the same time. That's how stupid Hextall is. How are you going to bring in a guy that's going to make 7.5 and clear that cap room by not trading Dumoulin or somebody with him? Oh no, let's give him 2 first-round picks. Imagine Vancouver took that. How the fuck are you going to make that cap room up? You can't. There's no way you can make that cap room up. Meanwhile, back on the ranch, he grabs Mikael Granlund for $5 million per for the next 3 fucking years, who in reality is a third-line center. For just a little more money, and we're not talking a lot, we're talking $200,000 and a first-round draft pick. We could have had Tyler Bertuzzi. That's a game changer. He's youth and he can score. That's the game change you make. Granlund for $5 million or Bertuzzi for 5.2. Who would you take? And that's my point. Radko Gudas. He's a chippy fuck. He plays a dirty style. He makes $2.5 million. Kulikov, 2.1. So really, a difference of $500,000. You get a guy who's nasty. Which one between Kulikov? And listen, I don't know a lot about Kulikov. I don't think he's played bad at all. I have nothing against Kulikov. But Gudas, we know what we're getting. Which one would have benefited the Penguins more, Gudas or Kulikov? And my point exactly is this. Hextall's system for evaluating players is atrocious. Tyler Bertuzzi. But no, we'll take Granlund. And I'm not knocking Granlund. I don't think he's been a horrible player. But you need somebody who can fucking score. You can imagine putting Bertuzzi with Crosby and Gensel, that it moves Rust down to the second line with Malkin, Raquel, and Rust. Now they got Raquel on the third fucking line trying to shore up all of the fucking problems we have there because the trades he did, the trades he facilitated did not fix the goddamn problem. And that's the problem with this team. It's not just one thing. And at the end of the day, the ship is flooding. And listen, I'm not a fair weather fan. I'm realistic about where we're at. This is an above average team in name, and this is an above average team based on prior performance and cup wins. But today, right now, they are below average in every single category. And the question I have for you is, have they gotten better? Are they the same or are they worse? When you make depth moves, it's to give you more, not less. It's not even designed to balance it out. You want to get better. Look at the Boston Bruins and what they've done. They're an whole fucking team, but every decision they made put them right over the edge. Personally, I think it's too much talent because we've seen how that works because Tampa Bay has flaked out early a couple of years in a row. But good teams make decisions based on longevity to sustain winning. Boston, like I said, they're as old as the Penguins. However, look at what they did. They surrounded themselves with a support system playing a smash mouth game. They play an emotional game. Every game they play, go and watch any of their games in the last 5. Watch their highlights. Then go watch the Penguins. It's like watching 2 old ladies go to lining up to go to bingo on Thursday nights after the 4 p.m. dinner. That's the difference between the two teams. Most nights they play asleep. Where's the gusto? Where's the fucking emotion? Where's the drive? Where's the body contact? Jake Gensel runs from fucking hits. He's unwilling to take a hit to get the puck. God, do I miss guys like Pascal Dupuis who would get buried in the corner, but they'd go get that goddamn puck. Tyler Kennedy's of the world. They would get annihilated just to get that puck. Gensel runs from every single fucking hit there is. Watch him. Next game, he runs away from hits. That puck goes into the corner. He slows up and peels to the right because he doesn't want to get hit. Look, I love Jake Gensel. He's a great player, but he's a pussy. He's a pussy. If you're afraid to get hit in the NHL, you shouldn't be playing there. Zucker, Archibald, They go into the corner. They'll take the fucking hit to get that puck. Paling, when Paling wasn't injured, Paling will go right into that corner and get that puck knowing he's going to get drilled. Watch a game and see how many times we run from hits. Watch how many times Brian Dumoulin gets beat around the outside, and watch how many times he's laying on the ice, crawling on all fours, trying to find his stick or trying to get up. Watch the play in front of the net. There's barely any cross-checking or any physical jostling at all, other than Letang. And Kulikov was doing it the first 2 games. How many times do our defensemen bury opposition forwards in the corner? Do you need an example of how that works? Go back and watch Brooks Orpik during our cup win to see how that's done. That's how you win games. Forwards are going to think twice about going deep when they're getting hit every time they go there. Penguins, they might as well just roll out the red carpet. Say, excuse me, Sarah, what kind of tea would you like tonight? Oh, no. Take your time. Have you watched Sidney Crosby lately? Start watching him. He's taking cheap shot after cheap shot on opposing players. And Crosby gets grimy. He gets surly. He gets pissed off. He'll take a cheap shot here and there. But watch him the last 7 games behind the play. He's butt-ending guys. He's punching guys in the back of the head. That's not how Sidney Crosby plays. He's completely frustrated. And I totally understand where he's coming from. And go back and watch since the night he got thrown out of the game for barking at the ref. How many times does Crosby get thrown out for barking? Almost never. He used to get 2-minute penalties in 10 minutes. But he got thrown out of the game. And that's the best visual representation that I can give you of what the temperature is on this team and what's going on. Look at Jason Zucker. He's all over the place. He's a one-man fucking army, him and Archibald. Yet there are going to be those who are going to say, don't pay him next year. Let him walk, because he's going to earn a paycheck. He's going to have almost 50 points this season. He's going to earn his paycheck. He's doing all the gritty shit on this team. He has swagger. He's the only one that has it. He runs his mouth. He creates static. He draws penalties. And sometimes I wonder, other than Zucker and Archibald, where the fuck is the rest of this team? And that's where this team is at today. And the reason why Hextall should be fired is for the same symptom we've been clamoring about since last year. Goaltending fucking let us down last year. You should never lose a 3-0 series lead. That's number one. You should never lose a 3-series lead. That's number one. Number two, goaltending let us down. And the big talk was, we really need to do something at the deadline, the free agency to kind of acquire another goalie. And then suddenly, for some fucking odd reason in August, we like what we have. Oh, do you? Okay. So the first 3 or 4 games of the season, the Penguins looked fantastic, and everybody was like, oh, thank God. But then by the 8th or 9th game of the season, they started losing nonstop, and everybody said, oh, fuck, it's the goaltending. So we've watched this ebb and flow since November 10th. And here we are, almost one day past the middle of March. And they did nothing to even think about replacing goalies. And that baffles me. And that's what proves to me that Hextall just does not evaluate players properly. I've heard the excuses, Jerry's got hurt, whatever. And if there's any truth to he's had hip issues and you still did nothing to facilitate a trade to help this team, then really, what are you doing? Are you intentionally tanking this fucking team? Is that what you're doing? Is Sullivan intentionally tanking the team and making shitty lineup decisions just to throw it in Hextall's face? I'd love to believe that's not the case, but some of the decisions on personnel, it just blow my fucking mind. And so how does it resolve itself? I'm going to tell you how. They lose in the first round or they don't make the playoffs, and everybody should be fucking fired. Sullivan has been great for this franchise, but I'm going to tell you something that nobody mentions. Coaches in Pittsburgh, other than Scotty Bowman and Eddie Johnston, don't last more than 5 years. And they don't because it's a country club atmosphere. and the systems are stale. Our sort of mantra of the Pittsburgh Penguins has been fast speed game. Goes all the way back to when Straka was playing and Recchi was here. Fast-paced team. We will outskate you. But you notice something? When we won the Cups, what did our team do better than any other team? We hit them. We checked them. We destroyed them in our end. Then somehow we turned into a team that just tried to outscore everybody. And for a while, for a season or two, that worked. We'd get out to 6-7-1. Yeah, who cares they score a goal at that point? But now they can't even hold on to a lead. Defensive errors, forward errors, simple mistakes, nonstop. And the Penguins are getting exploited because it's easy to see. And as a coach, that's hard to facilitate when you have what you have. But you know, there's a thing called, we're going to change the system. We've been a passive team. We are now going to hit everything that fucking moves. And I'm going to tell you right now, Crosby, you're going to hit people. Malkin, you're going to hit people. Archibald, you're going to hit people. Gensel, you run away from another fucking check, you're going to find yourself in fucking the ECHL. Or I'm going to trade you to another fucking team. Instead, what Hextall does is takes McCann, who was a hitter, who's going to score damn near 50 points this season, lets him walk. Gets rid of Brandon Tanev, who's going to get near 40 damn points this year, who hits everything in his sight. Joe Vitale, remember him? Used to hit everything in sight, would fight anything, didn't care. Where are those guys? When did we become a team that needed 4 scoring lines of excellence? Because what happened to us last year after we won 3 games in a row against New York, all New York realized was, oh, we just have to run them over. We just have to run them over, and they can't compete with us. If we're physical with them, they can't compete with us. Look at every game they've played this year against a team that was physically superior to them. They got floored. They got lucky the other night. They won in overtime and beat the Rangers. Thank you, Chris Letang. But the reality is the playoffs are a different vehicle, and they didn't bring anybody in that could help them. Remember, we brought Ryan Reeves in to protect Crosby and Malkin and to use the body. That lasted all of, a season and a half before Rutherford got rid of that idea. So the bigger question is from Burke, who I love. I think it's an excellent hockey mind. And Hextall, who I think is a borderline retard. What is your identity? Because it seems to me like Burke has one identity, Hextall has another, and Sullivan has another. Sullivan wants a fast-paced team that shoots and scores a lot of goals. Burke wants a team that's going to have snarl and make opponents pay physically for their actions. And Hextall's somewhere baking cookies and has no idea what planet he's on. Him and Ilya Brizgalov ought to get married. I'm serious, because they're both space cadets. And so the final end of this is that I don't expect this team to be very good. I expect them to probably go 7-8-5, like I said earlier. 1 game over 500, 2 games over 500 the rest of the stretch. And if they end up against Boston, it's over in 4 games. The Penguins won't win a game. They just won't. And you can't expect all of a sudden Casey D. Smith to be an all-star quality goalie. You can't expect Jerry to do it. And you can't expect the Penguins to compete with younger teams if they're unwilling to play the body. And that's just what it comes down to. And I understand the NHL is very different these days. It's a different style, different schemes. But I'm talking to all you hockey players out there that are like me that grew up playing. The game is simple. The game is very simple. All of this X's and O's and total ice time and all of these curvatures and arcs on strengths and weaknesses and how far you can jump and how tall you are. None of that shit fucking matters at the end of the day because it's hockey 101. Everybody has been playing the game since they were 2 years old. It's not that complicated. The reason why it gets complicated is because you're asking guys to do what they physically can't, and you're asking a team to be better than they actually are. And that comes down to just reality. And I think Sullivan knows where his team is. I think deep down he understands they're not a good team. Some of that he has to own, believe it or not. He has to own it. The coach cannot make players better than they are. They're supposed to. Like guys like Tortorella, as much as we all probably dislike him a great deal, I'd love for him to be in Pittsburgh. Oh, you imagine the shit he would give some of them, because that's what they need. But every 5 years, we see the same thing. The coach loses his voice because the system is stale. And listen, Crosby's been in the league 18 years. He's still averaging over a point per game. He's probably going to get close to 90 or 100, probably closer to 95 points this season. At 35 years old is fucking impressive. Beyond impressive that he's almost at 2 points per game player. Insane. But how much longer can he sustain that? Malkin isn't going to sustain it. I'm just telling you. He'll be done in a year. He's not going to. I don't think Malkin will finish his career in Pittsburgh. I just really don't. Because I think the Fenway group, despite what all of you may think, I think they're going to press hard this offseason. They're done. If they're going to invest $30 million in PPG Arena, they're not going to tolerate this mediocrity. And the other thing is, too, where's Mario Lemieux been? He's been to 2 games all year. He's still an owner. So I don't know. But I think how this is going to end, and I think how it should end, is Hextall should be removed. They need to bring in somebody that wants to change. Remember when Burke took over, he says, we're going to bring change to Pittsburgh. We're changing the way this team is going to play. We're going to be feared. We're going to score and we're going to pound. Problem is, you got a coach that doesn't want to employ that type of scheme. So at some point, if Sullivan's the problem, he's got to fucking go. If Hextall's the problem, he's got to go. But if I'm a part of an ownership group at this point, after that many years, and next year is Sullivan's re-up year, I shit can him before that kicks in, so I don't owe him a fucking dime. You can get a good coach, Bruce Boudreau, Gerard Gallant. I mean, well, probably not. I think he actually got a job. But there's so many other coaches you can get to bring in to change the tempo and the pace of this team. So they listened to Sullivan for like 5 years. We won 2 cups. But he also came to a team much like Bilesma did when Bilesma won. He came to a team that was primed to win and stocked and ready to win. But take that away a couple years, and we're right back to the Bilesma fucking Linus syndrome all over again. It's not Crosby's fault. It's not Malkin's fault. It's not even Letang's fault. But if you have an aging core, why don't you do the right fucking thing and bring in players that are a good support system? They don't. They bring in garbage. Archibald's a great player. I love him. I'd put Archibald on my team tomorrow if I could. I have no problem with guys like that. He gives it everything he's got. But when you've got an Islander sitting down in the fucking AHL, lighting the lamp nonstop, let the kid fucking play. You risk nothing by letting him have a regular shift on the third line. He can't be any more fucking miserable than Jeff Carter at this point. And that's sort of my point, is that you can never tell how great a player is going to be if the standard is, well, you get to come up for a game, I'll play you 6 minutes. If you don't score, I'm not going to waste my time. And that's what Sullivan's sort of mantra is. He sees flaws in everybody's game, but yet he does not see the major flaw in Brian Dumoulin or Jeff Carter, apparently. So I don't know if he's blinded because Hextall likes Carter. I'm sure Jeff Carter is a great guy. But Father Time catches up to everybody. And the reality is that's a contract that Hextall fucked up on. Same kind of contract he gave Krappinen. Fucked up on that one. But then he almost triples down. And rather than get somebody like Tyler Bertuzzi or JT Miller, we get Mikael Granlund, who is not going to put up 40 points on this team. That's just reality. And that's the state of the Penguins. Anyway, so I hope you guys all enjoyed the show. We will be back probably in the next week, 2 weeks maybe, right before playoff time to talk about it. We're still trying to figure out a way to do this live so you guys can come on and hang out. In the meantime, we got 2 big games against the New York Rangers coming up. First one tomorrow night at Madison Square Garden. I heard the Penguins are already in town because a buddy of mine told me that they were eating in a restaurant tonight. I should have gone down there and booed them and threw fucking turds at them or something. But listen, if they can pull 1 win out of 2 there, that's not bad. But they got to win one of them. They just, if they have any desire or any hope to catch New York, which I don't think they're going to do. Anyway, that's it. You guys have a great weekend, and let's go Pens.